Welcome to One-on-One. I'm Greg Bassett, your host from the Salisbury Independent newspaper. And today we have a really interesting topic, one that gets talked about in our community a lot, UMES football. Whatever happened to it, and what are the prospects of ever getting it back? We've got Bryant Mitchell with us from UMES. Bryant, welcome to One-on-One.
Thank you very much.
So, a storied program down there, one I grew up with. I was telling you that Emerson Boozer was a star of the 1969 Super Bowl, which caused my father great anguish and upset as a Colts fan. Very familiar with the program. I idolize Art Shell. He is absolutely one of my heroes. UMES football has been gone for a long time, and you're one of the people who would like to bring it back.
Yeah, we have an organization that we formed, I guess, in 2002 called Hawks of Football. And actually, it's the opportunity to try to bring it back has been going on almost since it was gotten rid of. But I guess formally, an organization was formed in 2002 called Hawks of Football. And a person named Joanne Johnson Shaw is the vice chair, is the chairman of it, and I'm the vice chair. And we have been trying to organize the alumni to raise money to help make the decision easier to bring it back, because one of the things everybody always brings up is the financial issue. And so we're trying to organize the alumni to support the bringing back the program financially.
Now, I know when Dr. Juliet Bell first came to town, I interviewed her early on when she was here, and she was shocked at how everyone who came up to her asked, one of the first questions was about UMES football. And she said she had no idea how important the football program had been to the history of the school. She commissioned some sort of a study, and I think they decided that it wasn't quite the right time to do that. So are you guys pushing against that kind of an attitude, or is it is there some new momentum coming back?
Well, actually, the study was funded. The study was funded by Hawks of Football. When she first came here, we went to her and said, well, we know you probably need to do some type of feasibility study, given that you're a brand new president. So the organization actually put up the money to try to come up with a base point for a conversation to bring it back. Obviously, we had set up some funds, but we hadn't raised the amount of money that the university thought was sufficient to bring it back at the time. And so what the study suggested was it would be reviewed in the next 3 to 5 years as to whether or not it was financially feasible to bring the program back. And so what Hawks of Football has been trying to do in the interim is to begin to organize the people who say that they want football back and let them know that.
Which is everybody.
Well, the way it works is, though, you got to support the program.
Right.
I mean, one of the things that you can't just support it verbally or lip service. You actually got to do something. So we've established 3 funds related to football. One fund is related to club football, which we started about 3 years ago. Dr. Bell actually approved the initial idea to get that started. We have another one where we have a documentary project, because our view is if you're not going to bring it back, at least you can document it. If you can't bring a dinosaur back, at least you put it in a museum.
Right, good point.
So we are looking at trying to raise the rest of the money to have the documentary. And we think that the documentary will also help get people interested in bringing it back. So we created a documentary short. We've already invested in that. The total documentary is going to be like $150,000. So far, we've already spent $35,000 on the short, which people can view on our website. And hopefully that will, and once we get the actual documentary, we hope to get it on public TV or 30 for 30 or one of those sports programs, so that the word about what we're trying to do can get out there. And then the third thing we've done is we've actually set up another fund to bring back the actual NCAA version football program. So, we had to, over the last 10 years, we've had to put some infrastructure in place in order to make it easy. So we think now we have the infrastructure in place that people can either say, well, I don't think you guys can have football, so can we have club? We've funded the club program. Actually, I'm currently the head coach of the club football program, and I put a lot of my own money in it in order to get that started. But that was just to let people know. I mean, little kids have football,
Right.
so there's no reason for it. You think you can't have anything. So club is kind of just kind of to get the students excited and give them an opportunity to see what it was like to see a football program.
Now, the history of that program is fascinating because there's so many really unique players who went through there. Was it just a special time and place? Not that the teams were that great, but there were certain players that have stood the test of time.
Well, when you go back to the very inception of the program, you can go back and talk about Swifty Polk, who was a 3-time All-American.
Yeah.
Who had scored 129 points in a season. Back in the 1940s, a lot of people were coming out of the military, so UMES was fortunate to get a lot of talent at that time. One of the things that people don't know about our program is we focus on the players, but really it was the administration at the time that really made a difference. J.T. Williams, who was the president of when UMES went from basically a junior college to a 4-year school.
Maryland State.
When Maryland State was created. The funny thing is, the year before Maryland State was created, the team was 8-0. So as a junior college program, they had an 8-0 team. So you basically when he came, he replaced the football coach, who was 8-0 with Skip McCain. So that lets you know what his perspective was in terms of how important football was going to be in athletics in general. If you go back and look at history, you can see that he had 3 basic goals at the time when he came. One was to focus on the military because, they had just desegregated the military. So we had one of the few Air Force ROTC programs in the country. The second thing was athletics, and then obviously being a land-grant college, agriculture program. So these were the 3 main themes that he was focusing on during his tenure as president. And then the other thing, obviously, he wanted to become a full-fledged part of the University of Maryland system, which happened in 1970. So the Maryland State era is the era of J.T. Williams. And in terms of athletics, his most important decision was to bring on Skip McCain. And then Skip McCain came along, and what he did was he assembled some coaches. For example, a lot of people are not aware of the fact that Coach Banks, who went up to Morgan and did an extraordinary job there when he went up to Morgan, they won 30 straight games. He was an assistant at UMES. He's in the College Hall of Fame for the work that he did at Morgan as well as what he did at UMES. Also, a person named Nat Taylor, who was an assistant football coach at UMES and basketball coach,
Right.
went to Morgan and they won the national championship with Marvin Webster, who
Right.
coincidentally was the number 2 pick in the draft that year.
Right.
And he had spawned several other coaches that have gone on to different universities and won. One of his players, Henry Ford, I believe, went to Hampton or one of those schools, I can't remember, and they won championships. So it was one of the things that we do. We tend to focus on the players. I mean, obviously, you got people that went to the Hall of Fame and people like Art Shell. You have Emerson Boozer in that famous 1968 game. You have with the Denver Broncos, for example, we have a player that's in the Ring of Fame. So you had a lot of players that made a mark in the league as well as at the collegiate level. But I think what is underappreciated is what the administration was doing and how they organized the stuff with very little resources in order to make it happen.
What would be the attraction of coming to a school like UMES if I'm a player, potential player?
Well, I think it's the same attraction for any of the other 4,400 students to come there, first and foremost. I think it's an excellent university, a very good value, and that's one of the things that people don't understand is the value that you get. Like in my own experience, I went down there to play football, but I was fortunate enough to get to go to Columbia University Graduate School of Business, which at the time was number 6. I also got accepted to the University of Pennsylvania, which was number 2 at the time. And I did that primarily because I was able to go to, to go to UMES. So even then, we were considered to be a little backwater school. The education that I got enabled me, to do pretty well. I actually met my former wife at Columbia. My wife at Columbia University, and I tutored her.
Wow.
That's how I actually met her in finance. Gerald Irons, for example, went to the University of Chicago. I avoided the University of Chicago because it was a quant school, and I didn't really want to do that. But he went there and also got a law degree. So people were able to come to UMES, even though it wasn't noted for academics, and to do extremely well academically. So we've had several alumnus who have been successful in business and other areas as a result of going to UMES. It's just like any other university. So I think first and foremost, the value that you would get from an educational standpoint. The school has grown significantly. We're in the process of building a new engineering building, and there's a lot of other things slated to come that will help improve the stature of the university. But I've always felt that it was the educational value. As a person, you go and you have aspirations of saying you're going to go to the pros, and a lot of people ask me, "Did you go to the league?" And I said, "No." I saw a person go to the league. When we played in 1976, we had Carl Hairston who played on the team with us. And he played for 15 years and coached for another 15 years. So he got an opportunity. They actually pulled him off the back of a truck. He was, and brought him down to UMES. And, he was one of the best players that we've ever had. Played the longest of any person in the league. Coached the longest of any person in the league. And when you talk about opportunity and value, the team that he got drafted on was 0-10. So, when you ask the question of, it's just, giving a person an opportunity. There's an abundance of talent out there. There's no lack of talent. A lot of the young guys don't have direction. They come out of high school and they don't have the requisite skills academically to go directly to some of the top programs, but they do have athletic ability. You see it all the time. I see it with my club team. We have a guy, for example, who's going to be coming down next year. He's enrolled at UMES. He went to Parkside, had about 5,000 yards, one of the top runners in the state of Maryland. And because of whatever reason, he ends up at UMES. So we're going to talk to him about how we can help him get back on track, come and play with us for a year in our club team so he won't lose any eligibility, and just try to get him on track academically. So we see that one of the services that our club program can offer a lot of local talent is the opportunity to come and to get themselves back on track academically. Because one of the roles that I play at UMES in the Department of Business is I am the freshman advisor. So I teach our introductory freshman courses. So you understand a lot of the issues that freshmen have to deal with. And having gone to UMES and had the opportunity to go to graduate school and some other things, you can talk to them about the real opportunity of college. So I think the opportunity for college is transformational. You get an opportunity. I grew up here on the Eastern Shore in a place called Wetumpka, Maryland. Nobody would have thought that, I would now be sitting here with a PhD from Clemson University or having had the opportunity to go to an Ivy League school. So this was what was afforded to me, because of the UMES opportunity. If it wasn't there, I don't know if I'd have been able to do the same thing.
The opportunity is interesting because Coach Shell, Art Shell, when I interviewed him, and the university, I think, puts a lot of pressure on him to come back and do stuff. And I asked him one time if he enjoys coming back, and he said, absolutely. He goes, this place taught me so much. It gave me the incredible opportunity, but it also helps me understand what I needed to do to get to that next level. And I don't completely understand what he means by that, but I know how completely much he believes that. but he's a great example of someone who might have been a completely different person without UMES.
Well, again, I mean, if I, I know Art, but the best story that I have is the one about Carl Hairston, who I actually played with. I mean, from what I understand, Carl was a truck driver.
Right.
And one of the recruiters from UMES happened to see him because he was from Martinsville and encouraged him to go back to school. When you look at his career after that, he would have never gotten that opportunity. He used to be probably retired from driving a truck. And so a lot of student athletes that went to UMES had a similar situation, being first generation. A lot of them didn't have a lot of information about what the opportunity to go to college was. If you think about Art in the time that he came along, I mean, the values that we learned on the football field in terms of tenacity and not giving up. Here I am now, it's been, 30-some years since you had football, and somebody says, well, do you think you're going to bring it back? I have the same confidence. Actually, I'm more confident today than I was in previous years because I think we've done some things that's going to enable us to bring it back. I think that tenacity came directly from football. I remember the way that I got to go to Columbia University. I went over to our career services one day, and you noted that the people that were coming down to interview was a couple of years older than me. So I basically challenged Miss Waters, who was a career services person at the time, and said, look, why don't you bring somebody down here that can hire somebody, because these people, all they're doing is practicing on us. That kind of attitude was coming directly from football. So what happened was she actually went to a conference and bought a person from Mobil Oil and convinced him to come from D.C. down to Princess Anne, something that he was never intended on doing. But because of the preparation that I had gotten from football, I was able to secure a scholarship to go to Columbia University. And I can relate that directly back to football, because one of the things that the guy said to me was, what schools are you thinking? What are you thinking about doing? And I said, well, I'm thinking about going to graduate school. Then he says, what schools? And I said, I went down the list: Harvard, Cornell. At that time, it was a program called the Consortium, Columbia, and University of Pennsylvania, which I had already applied to. He didn't really know that. So he said to me, if you get accepted to any of those schools, we'll pay for it. And so I looked at him and said, okay, bet. Because I had already applied. I had decent grades. I didn't realize, at the time how difficult and challenging it was. I was fortunate to get into the school, but when I got accepted to University of Pennsylvania in Columbia, I would call them up and said, hey, you said you'd pay for it. And I ended up at Columbia University. So that was a direct result of some of the things that I learned from football. So even though we weren't very good, on the football field, in the classroom, it supported, what I was able to do in the classroom. Some of the discipline that we learned from football translated directly into the classroom.
Do these guys these days understand how lucky they are? I mean, compared to what you came up with through in the 1970s, going to UMES, being from with Tipton, Maryland, going to Columbia University, being surrounded by brilliant people all the time, probably not feeling like you're good enough. I mean, when I was in college, I couldn't believe how smart and competitive everyone was around me. It never occurred to me it was going to be like that.
As a person who was teaching at the school that I went to and understanding what it was like when I went there, when I talk to students today, I look at a lot of those students and see that they kind of have an inferiority complex. I have students that have excellent grade point averages and involved in a lot of stuff in terms of clubs and things like that, and then they start talking about going to graduate school, and they'll say, well, I'm thinking about going to this school. I said, well, there's nothing wrong with that school, but why would you go there with the profile that you have? So I don't think a lot of people appreciate, as you pointed out, the opportunity that they have.
I mean, they usually get it together, but it seems like in the formative phase, it would be good if they were like, wow, we're walking on the backs of a lot of people here.
Well, today you have the greatest opportunity.
Yeah.
And the unfortunate thing is a lot of people don't understand it, and they don't take advantage of it. There are tremendous opportunities, whether it's online education. There's a lot of different things that you can do in order to pursue your careers. I think about UMES and in the 1970s when we were in a small building with only 4 rooms, and even the facility that we have now that they're talking about renovating in a couple of years and upgrading, it's no comparison. I mean, we had basically 5 people that were teaching. Now we have a complement in our department, about 20 to 25 PhDs. Back then it was a couple of PhDs. So it's a different situation. And I don't think, as you pointed out, I don't think people really understand the extraordinary value that they're getting at a place like UMES. It's still relatively inexpensive. And, you know, students go on, the ones that get it, they go on and do extremely well.
Let's go back to that Super Bowl in '69 again. How many players from UMass were in that Super Bowl?
We had 5 players in that Super Bowl. We had Emerson Boozer. We had, it was 3 on the Jets. Emerson Boozer, who was it? Can't even remember. Johnny Sample.
Right.
And Earl Christie.
I wrote it down.
Emerson Boozer, Johnny Sample, Earl Christie. And then we had Stooks.
Robert Taylor.
Well, if you count Robert Taylor, that makes 6.
Yeah, Johnny Duncan.
Because I don't think Robert Taylor was actually on the team. I think he might have been on the practice squad.
Okay.
So really, there is a dispute as to whether or not it's 5 or 6.
Right.
But Robert Taylor would have been the 6th person.
But that record stood for a long time.
Absolutely.
Until Florida State broke it somewhere there in the 90s.
And you know, Florida State, when they had that excellent run, I think in the era that they had Deion Sanders.
Right.
So, I mean, that more than anything tells me the quality of the program that we had. Because if you think about it, there were less teams back then. And so it was much more difficult to get into the NFL than it is, I think, than it is today. Because there were less teams and there were less players. So those guys were extraordinarily talented people.
Now, there's an African-American historical element to all of this. Talk to me about that a little bit.
Well, there's a couple of things. If we go back to the very beginning, 1948, UMES played the first interracial game between Albright University and a historically black college. As a matter of fact, one of the things that's little known about the whole UMES history is that UMES was one of the few historically black colleges that were playing interracial games. As a matter of fact, one of the things that delayed our entry into the CIAA, which was the main black conference at the time, was that we were playing these interracial games. And actually, until we stopped playing them, they didn't actually let us into the CIAA. So if you ever get an opportunity to go down to our gym and you walk along the corridor, there's a big blown up article that if you read it, basically what it talks about is the fact that we were playing this independent schedule at the time, and we were playing a lot of majority white universities, and that the CIAA wouldn't let us in as a result. So it's kind of strange to me how things have flipped around. You know, now you play these guaranteed games, and typically they're against larger white schools in terms of, and particularly in things like basketball. But back then, we were basically trying to prove that the institution and the athletes, obviously, and the coaching staff could compete with anybody. And so anybody that would play us at the time, we actually were called the Black Notre Dame at one time because we were independent. We were playing an independent schedule. But historically, the school has done a lot of things, a lot of firsts. For example, the first coach in the NFL from a historically black college in the modern era, you know, Art Shell. The first person to go to the college all-star game, Johnny Sample, he was the first. So there were a lot of firsts that went along with the program. And this extended not just in football, but in track. You know, the famous Olympics in 1968, when everybody was standing up, holding their hands up. We had actually had 2 athletes in that Olympics. We had one of the guys, the old guys, who went to school in the 50s, claimed he was one of the first people from an HBCU to get drafted in the Major League Baseball. So that was part of what J.T. Williams and Coach McCain was trying to do, was to develop a reputation for the university through athletics. And so that extended, you know, we talk a lot about football, but basketball, For example, in basketball, we were the first school to play in NIT. We're the only historically black college ever to be ranked in the top 20 of the AP and the coaches poll in basketball. So there are a lot of firsts.
Yeah, I know I'm harping on Shell, but you mentioned tenacity a couple times, and not being a great athlete. What I loved about him was he declared, "This is my position, and no one's getting by here." And there's playmakers, and there's those guys who have the ball, but there was just something about that skill, plus that personality, that determination, that I just admire so much.
Well, Art talks about some of the drills that they did at UMES, and one of the things that I understand, at least, is that they used to have him block two people at once. And some of the things that they did in some of the drills when he was there, because I remember when I first went down to UMES, I'd never experienced anything like that. As I said earlier, I didn't play my freshman year because I actually made the team, but I didn't think I was ready to play at the level that those guys were playing, so I actually quit. And I said, I'm going to go back and get in better shape. So when you think about people like Art and what they went through in terms of practice, because I remember the practices that we have and the stories that they would talk about how they practiced it during his era,
These are men. These are men.
These are real people. I mean, we have.
When you shake hands with Art, my hand is lost.
Let me give an example of something that probably very few people know about. We had a place where we had a little weight room, and they had a wall in the weight room. You could literally go and take the wall in the weight room and like this and push it back and forth. Now, the reason why that was that's how those guys practiced their forearm. So they practiced their forearm on this wall and had broken the seal on the wall. So you literally could, you could just push it back and forth. Now this is when you're coming in as a freshman and somebody show you something like this. Man, these guys used to practice forearms. You see that wall over there? Because we didn't have a lot of facility, obviously. So what those guys made it up in is tenacity, being in excellent condition. The amount of running that we did. For example, I remember we used to talk about we ran 6 miles in the morning. And when Carl Hairston went to the NFL, he was running that same 6 miles twice. So he was running 12 miles. And he was running with weight jacket and these boots. And basically he took off 0.6 of a second of his time in the 40. Which is extraordinary.
Yeah.
I mean, they used to have up on a board, they'd show you 40 times, and I remember seeing his as a junior was 5.2. When the scouts came down, he ran a 4.6. So he was able to transform his body and everything else and knocked off that. I mean, it still makes an impression on me even today. And he did that with basically the facilities that we had at the time, which if anybody was to come in there, they'd probably start laughing.
Wow.
But that's the level of tenacity that the players had. I mean, and so you're talking about when you start going back 10 years earlier with Art Shell and those guys, the way that they practiced, the discipline that they had, the desire to win and be successful. I mean, because when you thought about it, and you down in Princess Anne, it's not a lot there. And those guys wanted to be successful. So the drive to be successful that Art had is what propelled him to be one of the best offensive tackles in the history of football. And the first player, at least from our school, to be in the Hall of Fame.
Wow.
And that was what he learned down there with little resources. And so that's what I try to tell my students. I said, you don't always have to have the best facilities and the best resources. But if you have good coaches and you have someone who can help you understand what it is you have to do, then you can be successful. And as you pointed out, I think Art is a classic example of that.
What can the community do to help you guys in your next stage here?
Well, I think probably the most important thing that the community can do is, just support us financially. I mean, we need to raise money in order to do two things. One is obviously you need money to run the program. But the most important thing is a very challenging decision for Dr. Bell, because as soon as she did it, was to make that decision, you'd have a bunch of naysayers coming out with all of these studies talking about how football is too expensive and this and that. And so she's in a very difficult position, and we understand that. And so our goal is to try to raise $5 million. So if we could get people that say that they support the program, that give $100 or $500 or whatever they have available, that would go a long way to demonstrating that the community actually would like to see football. Because as they say in economics, dollars vote.
Right.
So, I mean, just sitting around talking is not going to do it. I mean, if you want to help us, we have a fund called the UMES Hawks for Football, which is the reinstatement fund for our NCAA version team. You can go online and make a donation. If you want to make a recurring donation where you make $5 a month or a week or whatever, you can do it. So we have now the facility to make it easy for people who say that they want to support the program to do it. And then just to encourage your friends, neighbors, and whoever else to do the same thing. And if we can do that, I think we'll get the critical mass that we need in order to be successful.
He's Bryant Mitchell. He's going to bring back UMES football, make our community a better place. It's going to be a really cool thing. Whatever we can do to support this, it would just be great. Bryant, thank you for being here today. Really, really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
I'm Greg Bassett from Salisbury Independent, another edition of One on One right here on PAC 14.